Here we are in the Flip Force deck builder. We've made a couple changes. I'm not going to go over too many of them today, but the number one thing is that as soon as you select a side, if you put cards in the deck, you aren't able to go and switch sides. And that was one thing we really wanted to lock up. Before you could, but we wanted to change it so you couldn't. So we're going to go over our Targeted Sith 2.0 today. In the previous Jedi training videos, we had focused on kind of more fun, more artsy style decks that were still capable of winning and weren't playing all the best units in the game, so to say. This month we wanted to focus on Targeted Sith 2.0 for a couple reasons. The first is we've had a lot of questions about it. The tournament success we've had with it has been awesome, and a lot of people have kind of inquired, wondering exactly how it plays. Some people have been having some problems. Heard a couple comments about resources and consistency, and we haven't had any of those issues. I think a lot of it comes down to playstyle, which is why we wanted to go ahead and make a video showing how we play the deck and how the deck works very consistently for us. So start things off, we are playing what we refer to as Core 4. The Core 4 starts with Vader. You get the main, you get two of these Dark Side Apprentice. Typically not going to do a whole lot for you during the game. I'm not actually a huge fan of Vader's lightsaber. I prefer it more in edge battles than on Vader. The only time I really care about it is if my opponent's playing Home 1, Luke, which obviously those cards you see a lot of play, don't get me wrong. It's just typically there's other ways of killing those guys that don't require me to have to pay resources. Force chokes, heat of battles, that kind of stuff. Force choke's obviously very good with Vader. I feel like you guys don't need to know any of this. You already know it. Heat of battle, obviously very good at winning edges, helping Darkseid win edges and doing damage in the meantime. Fall is very good. You have to know how to use it correctly. You have to know when to put cards back. If you have a fall in play and you're ever thinking about discarding a card, just use fall, put it under the deck. If you have a mediocre hand, you really need to get through some cards, discard a card and use fall, etc., etc. I typically don't like having more than one fall in play if I can help it. Next, Core 4 is going to be Emperor's Web. Emperor's Web gives you the Emperor, my favorite character in all of Star Wars. Obviously, he's very good at locking down boards, doing some damage. Often, I hear a lot of people say, never attack with Emperor, never attack with Emperor. I don't necessarily agree with that. I'm very much under the idea that there's just going to be some times where you need to lock down their board. You need to put them in a position where they have to draw a great hand in order to do anything against you. I think he's a much more versatile unit than a lot of people give him credit for, but he is very good at taking the Force. Emperor's Royal Guards are incredibly good units. That 3 health is just disgusting. Sith Libraries are always good. Just remember that when playing Holocrons, both are limited, so you have to make choices. Rounding out the deck with 4 Force Chokes I think is very, very important. We'll go over that in a bit. And the 2 Force Lightnings are typically just removal cards for, Luke. Typically not Luke, I guess, because he can, if he's locked down, I guess it's for Luke. But for Renegade Squadron, for Home 1, things that are just a little harder to kill when you need them dead. And I always try to put Emperor's Web on the bottom. I never want to see Emperor's Web in play. Light side meta right now is very dangerous for Emperor's Web. A lot of vehicles. I just don't like having it in play. Alright, and then sort of the Core 3, I guess you could say, would be Council of the Sith with these guys. Council of the Sith gives you some draw ability on your opponent's turn, which is crucial. 2 Twist are always good, very crucial in this particular deck. More free Sith events, obviously very crucial, and rounds it out to 4 total enhancement resources, which I think is very, very good. Quality security teams are not really great. They're just more Dark Side Apprentices. But these little advisors, they're fragile, but they're really good. You guys know all this stuff. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Alright, then the last part of Core 4 is going to be Executor Arrives. And I like Executor Arrives for its 2 resources. I know a lot of people like to put Imperial Command in here, almost guarantee you always have the 2 resources. I'm not a huge stickler on that. I do just fine basically on 4. 4's never really been a problem when you've got the Sith Libraries and the Holocrons. But we'll get to that. Executor Arrives gives you aggression. Again, I've heard people say aggression is not a great card because you have to lose a unit. Well, typically if I'm going to play aggression, it's because I'm going to kill the unit I want to kill. It means they only have one unit in play and I need it dead. Or they have two units in play and I want both of them dead. So I will gladly trade my unit, any one of my little units, for a unit of theirs that I desperately need dead. You get the holocrons, which I personally think are basically just resources. They're one-shot resources. You get 3 resources, but then it goes away. I think having, Force Lightnings, Vaders, Emperors, Executors, only having 2 holocrons in the deck and only having those guys I think is fantastic. I don't think that there's any downside there, personally. I see a lot of people misplay Liaisons. Liaisons are cards that you almost always just want to put into play. Unless you draw them off council, you're just going to put them in play, commit them to the forest, and pass the turn. And they give you such a distinct advantage during edge battles. When your opponent attacks into them, you can either use them as blockers or ways to win edge battles. So it's very similar to Dark Precognition in the sense of I'm going to get card advantage on my opponent in one way or the other. So I see a lot of people who don't understand the usefulness of these guys, don't play them correctly. I think these guys are great. I love having them in the deck personally. And then this big guy right here. This guy is, admittedly in this deck, he doesn't always hit the board. Sometimes he's just an edge card. But I will say we were going over our stats with the deck this weekend. We've gone 12-2 in tournaments thus far. And we've probably played the deck somewhere around 100-150 times in playtesting. And in all of those times, the Executor, I don't know, I want to say it's around 20 to 25% of the time will hit the board. The thing is 100% of the time when Executor hits the board, you win the game. I don't believe we've ever lost a game with Executor on the board. So, take that for what you will. I think that's a pretty incredible statistic if you really think about it. So if you can get him down, you play him, and if you can't, it's not the end of the world. You just put him into an edge battle. So at Worlds, we ran Core 4, and we had, I believe it was 1 Devastator and 1 Imperial Command. And the thing that we learned from that was it wasn't good enough. The 2-drops weren't good enough. We weren't effectively killing units. Sleuth got the jump on me on every one of the games I lost at Worlds, and I wasn't very happy about it. And then talking with Dennis, when we interviewed him for the Living Force, we learned how fearful he was of High Tax Squadron. And that really registered with me. And so thus we really went with Matt Cole's, John, Paul, Eric's idea of Defense Protocol in a Sith deck to really lock down the opponent. Now we've traded some resources obviously for that, but what we've done is we've increased the damage potential and the damage output in general. And we truly like it. It gives you 4 twists, 2 heated battles, which I think is fantastic. Death from Above will rarely see play, but when it does, it turns your Executor into a killing machine like the Devastator. Talon Roll is very tricky. Will let a High Tax Squadron blow up an objective on its own if it's unopposed. And it just can be a very mean card. TIE Fighters are really pretty worthless. They can stick some damage if you need them to. They're not great in edge battles, but they're good early turns and they're good mid turns. Not so great late game. TIE Tax Squadron, one of my favorite plays is to go 3 on a TIE Tax Squadron liaison past the turn after committing the liaison. It just puts your opponent in such a bad place because if they play a 2-drop, it's most likely going to die on your turn. So that's the deck in a nutshell. You can see that the only 2 Imperial cards, I guess there's 4, Death from Above and High Attack. You start Imperial, Navy, that's your affiliation, so you don't need to rely on seeing Defense Protocol in order to win the games or anything like that. But let's just go over a few things. Most light side decks, Han, Chewie, Falcon, Luke, and Guardians. That's 8 mains. Here you have 2 Vaders, 2 Emperors, 2 Executors, and 2 TIE Attack Squadrons. So you have 8 mains. Granted, one of them won't always see play. For blocking sleuths, let's see, you've got 4, 5, 6, 10, 14 2-drops that can come in and handle sleuth. I think you want to be anywhere from 13 to 15. 16 if you can. So I'm more than happy having 14 2-drops. You have 4 resource enhancements, 6 if you count the holocrons, which I personally do. And then you've got 2 advisors for some more resources. I really don't have problems with resources. Even at 4, all your little guys are pretty solid units. But the real clutch of the deck here is that, let's see, I've never actually counted them. I've always said there's only about 10 bad cards. So let's see, I would say this is a bad card, that's 2. I would say TIE Fighter's a bad card, Kauai Security Team's a bad card, that's 6. I would say Death from Above is a bad card, that's 8. And I would say Talon Roll is highly situational. It's only really good if that attack squadron's down. So you have maybe 8 to 10 cards that you just don't want to see over the course of the game if you can help it. And if you do see them, you just pitch them, you know. But that's 1 out of every 5 cards you see is a card you don't want to see. Those other, let's see, 6 cards, or those other 5 cards, those other 4 cards, those cards are going to be very, very good for you. And hopefully, as you see during the games today, I'm going to play 3, give you guys a good little variety of how the deck works. But hopefully you guys can see that the deck is very consistent. The deck does what it needs to do, and it rarely ever has cards in your hand that you just don't want to see. So that's what the deck looks like. Hope you guys like it. Hope you guys like the videos, and we'll see you next month for some Jedi training.